2:18 p.m. A small seaside garage, thick with the smell of diesel and salt air. The 35-year-old owner slides a termination notice across the desk. "We need someone faster, Elias. Younger." Elias, 43, doesn't argue. He simply removes his name tag, packs his tools, and walks out. 5:47 p.m. The ground trembles as a Navy helicopter makes an emergency landing on the dunes nearby. A high-ranking officer marches into the garage, his face grim. "Is the senior rotor mechanic still here?" The owner pales. The man he just fired is the only one within 60 miles who understands that system. Elias is a man of few words and deep disciplines. At 43, he carries the weight of a life lived in service, both to his country and to his family. He is a single father, raising a 12-year-old daughter named Maya in a house that smells of lavender and motor oil. 7 years ago, Elias wore a different uniform. He served 8 years in a specialized Navy rotor maintenance unit, working on the complex machinery that keeps multi-million-dollar aircraft in the sky. He was the man who could hear a hairline fracture in a steel blade before the sensors even picked it up. When he left the service, he brought that same meticulous, almost obsessive attention to detail to this small seaside town. He opened a civilian garage hoping for a quieter life, but he never learned how to cut corners. To Elias, a machine is a promise of safety, and safety cannot be rushed. In his locker at the garage, tucked behind his modern tools, hangs his old technical unit patch, a fading emblem of a time when his hands held the lives of pilots. His home life mirrors his professional ethics. Every morning begins at 5 a.m. with a ritualistic preparation of breakfast for Maya. He doesn't just cook. He ensures the nutritional balance is perfect, his movements in the kitchen as precise as they are in the shop. He listens to the hum of the refrigerator, the rattle of the toaster, his ears always tuned to the mechanical health of his world. He often spends his evenings reading old technical manuals or explaining the basics of internal combustion to Maya, treating her curiosity with the same respect he gives a high-performance engine. His life is a quiet rhythm of precision. Every afternoon, like clockwork, he receives a text from Maya. "Pick me up at 6, it reads. Elias is never late. He is a man of his word, a man who believes that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. He doesn't brag about his past. He doesn't wear his medals. He simply works, his hands moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a master craftsman. The garage owner, a man named Marcus, is 35 and driven by the cold, hard logic of profit margins. He took over the business from his father, but he lacks his father's soul. Marcus looks at the clock more than he looks at the engines. He sees the long line of cars waiting for service and sees lost revenue in every minute Elias spends double-checking a torque wrench. He wants speed. He wants high turnover. Marcus grew up in the digital age, where everything is replaceable and efficiency is measured in seconds. He believes that Elias is a relic of an older, slower time. "You're too meticulous, Elias," Marcus told him once, gesturing at a spreadsheet that showed a dip in afternoon productivity. "You're wasting time on things the customers don't even see." Marcus isn't a bad man, but he is a man blinded by the pressure of the bottom line. He doesn't realize that the things the customers don't see are the very things that keep them alive on the highway. He thinks he can replace decades of experience with a younger kid who can use a diagnostic computer faster. He thinks that expertise is just a matter of following a manual. He doesn't understand that true skill is earned in the grease and the heat, under the pressure of knowing that if you fail, someone doesn't come home. On this afternoon, Marcus made his choice. He traded quality for speed, not realizing that he was about to lose the only foundation his garage had. The atmosphere in the garage after the firing is heavy. The younger mechanics, Leo and Sam, avoid eye contact with Elias as he packs his toolbox. They respect him, but they fear Marcus's sudden ruthlessness. Elias moves through his station one last time, wiping down the surfaces with a clean rag and organizing the wrenches by size. He even greases the hinges of the cabinet he will no longer use. It is a ritual of respect for the craft. He doesn't feel bitterness. He feels a quiet, profound disappointment in the direction the world is turning. He looks at the ocean through the open doors, the waves crashing against the pier with an indifferent power. He thinks about Maya and the life they've built here, wondering if he can find another shop that values a man who takes his time. He carries his heavy steel chest to his truck, his muscles straining under the weight. He is a man who carries his own burdens. He sits in the driver's seat for a moment, looking at the garage sign in the rearview mirror. He isn't rushing to leave. He is just waiting for the clock to strike 6, unaware that the sky above the coast is about to bring his past screaming back into his present. The sky over the coast is a bruised purple, the sun dipping low toward the horizon. 5 miles offshore, a Navy MH-60 Seahawk is engaged in a routine coastal training exercise. The pilots, Lieutenant Miller and Ensign Graves, are experienced, but suddenly the cockpit is filled with a low-frequency jarring vibration. It's not a violent shake yet, but a subtle rhythmic thrumming that resonates through the floorboards. The sensors flash amber, indicating a variance in the tail rotor drive shaft. The flight manual is clear: land immediately at the nearest secure location to prevent a catastrophic failure. The main Navy base is 2 hours away, an impossible distance for a machine that feels like it's shaking itself apart with every rotation. The pilot spots the harbor and the small town behind it. He brings the massive bird down on the flat dunes, the sand swirling in a violent storm under the downwash. It is a forced landing, a moment of high-stakes military precision in a quiet civilian world. The townspeople gather at a distance, their phones out, capturing the sight of the gray steel beast sitting on their beach. This isn't a show. It's a critical mechanical emergency that could have turned into a tragedy. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance steps out of the aircraft, her helmet under her arm. She is the lead technician for the flight crew, and she knows exactly what that vibration means. She's seen it before in the simulator, but rarely in the field. She knows that without a specialist who understands the unique harmonics of the MH-60, that helicopter is grounded for days, and the training mission is compromised. She walks toward the nearest structure, Marcus's garage, hoping for a miracle, or at least a high-speed internet connection to call for support. Inside, Marcus is trying to look busy, but he is visibly shaken by the presence of the military aircraft on his doorstep. He imagines the liability, the press, the chaos. Sarah enters the garage, the smell of JP-8 fuel still clinging to her flight suit like a heavy perfume. She doesn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need a senior rotor mechanic," she says, her voice echoing off the corrugated metal walls. "We've got a critical imbalance in an MH-60 system. Our telemetry is spiking in the fourth harmonic. I was told there was a man in this town, a former chief, who served in the Navy Maintenance Corps. Is he here?" Marcus feels a cold lump of lead form in his stomach. He looks at the empty station where Elias worked for 5 years, now spotless and hollow. He looks at the help wanted sign he just started writing on a piece of cardboard. Leo, the younger mechanic, looks up from a brake job, his face pale. He speaks up before Marcus can formulate a lie. "We just let him go, ma'am, about 3 hours ago, because he was too slow." The word slow hangs in the air like an insult. The silence that follows is deafening. Sarah Vance looks at Marcus, her eyes narrowing with a sharp, disciplined intensity that makes the owner want to shrink. "You let him go?" she repeats, her voice dropping an octave, carrying the weight of a command. "You let go of a man with that level of certification for being slow? Do you have any idea how rare his skill set is? That man is a national asset, not a line item on your budget. You traded safety for a ticking clock." Sarah doesn't listen to his excuses. She turns to the door, looking out at the parking lot. She sees a battered blue truck with a heavy toolbox in the back, its engine idling. Elias is still there, parked near the edge of the lot. He was waiting for Maya's school bus to drop her off at the corner so they could go get ice cream before he broke the news to her. He is sitting in the cab, watching the waves, his hands resting on the steering wheel. Marcus follows her gaze, realizing that his mistake is sitting right there, 30 yards away, still within reach, but emotionally miles apart. The emotional micro-peak hits Marcus like a physical blow. He realizes that he didn't just fire a slow mechanic. He fired the only man who could answer the call when the stakes were at their highest. He sees the Navy officer's contempt for his efficiency and feels a deep, burning shame. Lieutenant Commander Vance doesn't wait for Marcus's permission. She strides across the asphalt, her boots striking the ground with military precision. Elias sees her in the side mirror. He recognizes the silhouette, the flight suit, the aura of someone who has spent their life around heavy iron and high-pressure situations. He steps out of the truck, his movements steady and calm. Sarah stops in front of him and renders a sharp, informal salute. "Chief Petty Officer Elias Thorne?" she asks. Elias hasn't heard that title in 7 years, but his posture straightens instinctively, the old muscle memory of discipline returning. "I was, ma'am," he replies. Sarah points toward the dunes where the Seahawk sits, its rotor still slowly spinning down. "We've got an MH-60 with a secondary rotor vibration. It sounded like a bird strike initially, but the telemetry shows a localized heat spike in the pitch link housing. I heard you were the man who wrote the supplemental repair manual on these systems at the Norfolk hub." Elias doesn't smile. He doesn't gloat about Marcus being wrong. He simply looks toward the helicopter, his eyes narrowing as he listens to the fading whine of the turbines. He closes his eyes for a second, isolating the sound. "What's the vibration frequency?" he asks. 14 hertz, Sarah replies. "And the heat spike?" Elias continues. 180 degrees over ambient. The technical dialogue begins immediately, a language of physics and engineering that Marcus and the other mechanics can't even begin to translate. It sounds like a secret code, a shared understanding of the invisible forces that keep a 10-ton machine in the air. Elias walks toward the helicopter, Marcus trailing behind him like a ghost, invisible to the two professionals. Elias doesn't ask for permission. He knows that in this moment, he is the highest authority on the beach. He approaches the aircraft with a reverence that borders on the religious. He doesn't use a computer first. He walks to the tail pylon, puts his bare hand on the cold metal, and asks the pilot to cycle the auxiliary power units. He listens. He feels the rhythm of the machine through his palms. To Elias, the helicopter isn't just parts. It's a living system with a pulse. He identifies a specific, high-pitched metallic click that occurs every third revolution. "It's not a strike," Elias says, his voice calm and certain. "It's a balance sleeve failure. There's a foreign object caught in the housing, likely a small piece of metal from the landing gear's lock pin that sheared off during the last cycle and got sucked into the intake. If you fly again, that piece becomes a bullet inside the rotor head. It will shear the pitch links in midair. It's a miracle it didn't let go over the water." The pilot, Lieutenant Miller, leans out of the cockpit. He had suspected a balance issue, but Elias's diagnosis is surgical in its precision. Elias recommends that they do not take off under any circumstances. He explains the physics of the centrifugal force that would turn that tiny shard of metal into a catastrophic weapon. He doesn't touch the aircraft. He knows the legal and military protocols, but he provides the Chan-Joan diagnosis that saves the crew's lives. This is the first emotional peak. Elias chooses safety over ego. He could have tried to be a hero and fix it right there on the sand with his civilian tools to show off, but he knows that true expertise is knowing when a machine is too dangerous to operate. He prioritizes the lives of the pilots over the chance to prove Marcus wrong. He stands there, a man in a grease-stained shirt, giving orders to officers, and he does it with the quiet dignity of a man who knows his worth. Marcus stands on the edge of the dunes, watching the interaction. He sees the way the Navy officers look at Elias, not as a slow mechanic, but as a sage. He hears the technical precision of Elias's speech and realizes that what he called slowness was actually a deep, meditative engagement with the truth of a machine. He remembers all the times he rushed Elias, all the times he complained about the extra 20 minutes Elias took to check the brake lines on a soccer mom's minivan. He looks at the helicopter, a machine that costs more than his entire town, and realizes that it is only as good as the man who maintains it. The faster, younger philosophy feels incredibly small and foolish in the shadow of that massive rotor blade. Marcus realizes that he hasn't just lost an employee. He has lost the moral center of his business. The confrontation isn't an argument. It's a silent, crushing realization of a massive failure in judgment. 2 hours later, a massive CH-53 heavy lift transport arrives from the naval base, its twin engines shaking the very air in the harbor. A team of 20 technicians swarms the beach, their equipment gleaming under the portable floodlights they've set up. The lead technician, an older Master Chief named Miller, who has seen everything from the deck of a carrier to the deserts of Iraq, walks over to Elias. He recognizes the face immediately. They served together a decade ago in the Gulf. They don't hug, they just nod and shake hands. A firm, calloused grip that says everything. "Good to see you still listening to engines, Elias," the Master Chief says. "Your call was right on the money. That pin would have shredded the housing within 10 minutes of flight. We found the shard. It was jammed right against the primary bearing. You saved us a lot of paperwork and a few good pilots. Your eyes are still the best in the fleet." There are no grand speeches, no medals given on the sand. Just the simple, profound recognition of a peer. For Elias, that is more than enough. He doesn't need the applause of a crowd. He just needs the respect of the men who know the stakes. Maya has arrived at the garage, standing by the blue truck. She watches her father talk to the sailors, her eyes wide with pride. She sees the way they stand a little straighter when he speaks. She doesn't fully understand the technical details, but she understands the gravity of the situation. Behind the garage, Maya has been tending to a small sapling she planted in a wooden crate a year ago. It's a coastal oak, a tree known for its strength, but notorious for its slow growth. Marcus happens to walk by as she is watering it, his mind still reeling from the day's events. He looks at her and sees a miniature version of Elias, the same patience, the same focus. "That tree is taking a long time to grow, isn't it?" Marcus asks, his voice soft, almost hesitant, seeking some kind of wisdom. Maya looks at him with her father's steady, unblinking eyes. "Dad says strong roots take time," she replies. "He says if it grows too fast, the wood stays soft, and the first storm will just knock it over. You have to wait for the wood to get hard. That's why he doesn't like it when I try to pull on the branches to make it taller. He says nature can't be rushed, and neither can good work." The metaphor hits Marcus with the force of a tidal wave. He looks at the small, sturdy tree, and then at the garage he's been trying to turn into a fast food version of a repair shop. He realizes that he's been trying to build a business without roots, without the hard wood of experience and integrity. He's been chasing the height of the branches while ignoring the health of the soil. The Navy team finishes their work. The Seahawk is secured, the foreign object removed, and the housing replaced. The Master Chief thanks Elias one last time before they prepare for takeoff. The beach is cleared, the turbines roar to life, and the massive machine lifts into the night sky, its navigation lights blinking like a new constellation against the black velvet of the horizon. Elias stands with his hands in his pockets, the wind from the rotors whipping his hair and stinging his eyes with sand. He feels a sense of completion. He didn't need the job back. He didn't need Marcus's apology. He just needed to know that the skill he spent 20 years honing was still there, still sharp, still vital to the world. He turns to walk back to his truck, ready to take Maya home and cook dinner. But Marcus is standing in his way, blocked by the shadow of the garage. This is the mini-climax. Marcus doesn't offer a corporate apology or a prepared statement. He looks Elias in the eye, his face pale and tired under the garage's flickering neon lights. "I was wrong, Elias," he says, his voice cracking slightly. "I was looking at the clock and I didn't see the man. I thought speed was the goal, but I see now that the goal is the people coming home. I was trying to run this place like a machine, but you're the one who actually understands what makes a machine work. I want you back, not just as a mechanic, but as the lead technical instructor. I want you to be the soul of this place. I want you to teach the kids how to listen to the engines. I want this garage to be the place where things are done right, no matter how long it takes. I'll even pay for the extra time. I want the roots to grow deep." Elias looks at the garage, then at his daughter, and then back at Marcus. He sees a man who has finally learned to value the long term over the immediate. He doesn't answer immediately. He takes his time. He thinks. Because as Elias knows, important decisions shouldn't be rushed. Elias accepts the offer, but he sets his own terms. He isn't interested in being a pawn for Marcus's PR or a trophy on a shelf. "I'll come back," Elias says, his voice firm and resonant. "But we change the way we work starting tomorrow morning. No more rushing the safety checks. Every young mechanic gets mentored for a year before they touch a brake line alone. We build a library of manuals, not just a rack of tools. And if I say a car isn't ready, it doesn't leave the floor. No matter who is waiting, no matter how much they complain. We sell safety, not just parts. Integrity is our only currency." Marcus nods without a second thought. He has seen the alternative, and he knows that the cost of a mistake, the cost of a sheared pin, is far higher than the cost of a few extra hours of labor. The deal is struck with a handshake, a real one, between two men who finally understand the same language of quality and respect. The town's perception of the garage shifts as well. Word spreads about the Navy helicopter and the man who saved it. People start coming from 3 towns over, bypassing the flashy, quick lube shops. They don't come because they want their cars back in an hour. They come because they want to know their families are safe when they hit the highway. Elias becomes a local legend, the man who fixed the Navy, though he always corrects them with a humble smile and says he only listened to it. He spends his days under the hoods of cars, but his real work is in the minds of the younger generation. He teaches Leo and the others that a wrench isn't just a tool, it's a responsibility. He shows them how to feel the vibration of a bearing and how to smell the difference between burning oil and a dragging belt. He is planting roots in them, ensuring that the craft will live on long after he puts down his tools for the last time. He becomes a mentor, a father figure to the shop, and a bridge between the old world of craftsmanship and the new world of technology. The final scene takes place on a quiet evening at sunset, months later. The ocean is a sheet of gold, and the air is cooling. Elias and Maya are standing on the pier, watching a distant gray shape in the sky. Another Navy helicopter, likely on a routine patrol along the coast. The sound of the rotors is a distant, comforting rhythm. Maya looks up at her father, her face lit by the dying sun, her expression thoughtful. "Were those people important, Dad?" she asks, referring to the officers from that day. Elias watches the aircraft until it disappears into the clouds. He thinks about the balanced sleeve, the sheared pin, and the pilots who are home tonight because he took the time to listen when everyone else was looking at the clock. "Every machine that carries people is important, Maya," he says softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Whether it's a helicopter or a school bus or an old sedan, the person inside is what matters. Our job is just to make sure they get where they're going safely. That's the only metric that counts. Never trade a soul for a second." Maya leans her head against his arm, and they stand there in the silence. The garage behind them is closed for the night, its tools cleaned and organized, its floor swept, its foundation solid. Elias is no longer just a mechanic. He is a man who found his place by refusing to move when the world tried to push him. He is the anchor for his daughter and the root for his town. He realizes that you can fire a man, but you can't fire experience. You can't fire the truth of a job well done. The narrator's voice drifts over the scene like the evening mist. They fired the only mechanic who listened longer than he spoke, thinking silence was a weakness and precision was a waste. Hours later, the Navy showed up to listen to him. They learned that speed is a vanity, but precision is a virtue that saves lives. Experience doesn't disappear with a paycheck. It doesn't fade when the office door closes. It waits. It waits in the quiet, in the grease-stained hands and the disciplined mind. It waits until it's the only thing that can save the day. As the screen fades to black, the sound of a perfectly tuned engine purrs in the background. A steady, reliable heartbeat in a world that is always in too much of a hurry. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and follow for more emotional journeys. Thank you for watching HITL Stories.